Welcome back to the Urban Debate. Ladies and gentlemen, as we speak, Indo-Canadian ties have hit rock bottom. There's no other way to describe it. With Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau unfortunately deciding to play truant for votes and risking long-standing diplomatic relations for domestic gains, India has been forced to expel Canadian diplomats from its soil and bring back its own diplomats from Canada. But while the foreign policy repercussions of this continue to dominate the agenda, and justifiably so, and by the way, you can tune in at 9:30 p.m. on Mirror now for an excellent, important analysis by my colleague Shreya Upadhyay on the same. There's also a critical human element which is at risk here, which is at risk also of being overlooked. Indians represent the largest number of immigrants to Canada as students, as tourists, as working professionals looking to settle there. With the latest figures, as you can see in 2022, easily touching an estimate of 1.25 lakh immigrants a year. A bulk of them are students. And when it comes to students, India dominates the international community in Canada. As many as 44% of international students in Canada are Indians. For perspective here, the next demographic is China at 12%. So India at number 1 has more international students than number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 combined. That's the dominance of Indian students in Canada. But this demographic has been feeling the pinch already. Because from October 2023 to December 2023, there was an 86% drop in study permits issued to Indian students from 1,08,940 to 14,910 as Canada started severely restricting the number of student visas handed out for multiple reasons. For its own domestic politics, in order to correct a failing economy, to address concerns of jobs being taken away by Indians, and also as a response to the frosting bilateral ties between India and Canada. But now, here's how these ties impact you. Firstly, you could see a further cut in the number of visas allowed, down from what we already saw in the previous figure. This will make it harder for you, whether you are a student, a family member looking to meet your loved one, a professional looking to settle abroad. It will make it tougher for you to do so. With fewer staff and consulates giving the mass expulsion of diplomats on both sides, expect longer processing times, stretching weeks into months for your visa to be approved. And it's not just one-way traffic. Even if you are in Canada, even if you've got a permanent residency, it may still be difficult for you to come to India to meet your loved ones because Canada has already in the past suspended Indian visas as well, leaving many stranded and unable to visit the family. There is a risk also of Indian missions abroad also suspending visa issues. And finally, air travel may not remain unaffected also because remember, it has Indo-Canadian flight operations have never reached pre-pandemic levels even after COVID-19 got over. So clearly with this impasse, thousands are caught in a painful limbo. Their dreams and livelihoods are stalled indefinitely. We are asking today, if this is a point of no return, where do we go from here? What do we do with the lakhs of people who are likely to be affected? Or is this just a pause in what has been a long partnership? And once elections are over in Canada, we'll see things coming back to reality. I'm being joined by three very important guests representing three different aspects of this debate. Prabhu Dayal, former ambassador, Naveen Chopra, founder and chairman of the Chopra's TC Global, and we have Asta Mana, a student also, someone who has aspirations of moving abroad, someone who also knows people who have had aspirations of moving abroad or have already moved abroad. Let me now start, Naveen Chopra ji, with you. We've seen a trickling down of the number of visas applicable and the number of study permits applicable in not just Canada but in all countries, but let's focus on Canada for right now. Is it time for our viewers to be genuinely concerned now, given the fact that what we are looking at is an unprecedented impasse with no clear end goal in sight? And for those who are planning to perhaps move abroad to study or to work, should they start already reconsidering their plans, Naveen Chopra?
Well, we have seen this kind of action in the past, in the last 30 odd years. There have been instances when governments have tightened up. But the local reality in terms of skill shortages and the fact that the education sector, the entire education sector, that includes universities, is dependent very heavily on the income of have shown on screen, is very clear that the Indian occupies a massive part of that traffic. Uh, if the situation that you have outlined were to become permanent, the tie up in arms, and a number of the institutions would be facing such financial stress that that some of them are coming closure. This has happened in almost every country, such because the simple fact is that the local Anglo-Saxon white population in negative territory. The local population is not that interested in going for the tough programs, for example, science, technology, maths, and engineering, and so on. And that has led to critical the health industry is in dire need, and of healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, and so on and so forth. So while this whole story is playing out, it looks dire at this time, personally, from past
So there are two
experience, my
takeaways, Mr.
own sense
Chopra.
is that it will play. Yes.
There are two takeaways from what you're saying, Mr. Chopra. I'm sorry, I'll have to cut you short because your network is a bit patchy and we'll try and strengthen that connection. But essentially, your argument, Mr. Chopra, is twofold. One is that this is not something which is a point of no return. You have seen ties deteriorate in the past, and they've eventually, with time, once a local election takes place, once local sentiments are visibly in terms of optics assuage, things come back to square zero. And second, you say that the basic economics of the situation ensure that there will always be a shortage of skilled labor, and therefore there will always be a demand for Indians to work and study abroad, especially in Canada. Is that really the reality? I'll get in my other guests on that. Astha, I'll get you in at this point. Astha Mana is a student as well. From your lived experiences, from yours and those around you, Astha, is it not getting a lot tougher for people who are moving abroad, especially to Canada, to get a job? Because from what I understand, and I've been in touch with a lot of Indian students here, they say that there are no jobs. They say that there is increasing hostility by the local community against Indians from taking over their jobs. They say that it's become a lot more expensive because local governments are exploiting them in terms of cash cows, in terms of increasing visa fees. And they say that it's genuinely reached a point where we wonder whether it was worth shifting to Canada at all. Is that a sentiment which you share, or am I perhaps imagining it?
No, it's exactly the sentiment which I share because I have my friends and family living in Canada. And as they share their recent updates with us, they generally say that the costings have gone up, not only for visas and studies, but also for daily needs. So, this is a factor that the economic scale is getting higher day by day. Apart from that, even if we talk about the visas or the education opportunities or job opportunities, so all the students who would be applying or would be wishing to apply to get a job or a, for example, a PhD in Canada would now would take a step back, as you know, these bilateral ties are getting too much hectic. And apart
Okay.
from that, even if Canadian government does not support the people staying there, how will the next generation who wants to go would be supported?
All right. So you're saying that it is clearly a dismal picture and things have progressively worsened, and that's the status we are seeing in many other countries. Well, Ambassador Daya, let me bring you in on this point. Mr. Chopra believes that this is a cyclical feature, and we generally see it in front of elections here because the priority of most elections or most governments, especially who are incumbent, is to fight anti-incumbency by giving the projection that yes, they are prioritizing locals first, in this case whites first, in this case sons of soil first. Is that the same thing which is happening right now, that at the end of the day, Mr. Trudeau is trying to fight for his vote bank, and after the Canadian election, the dust of the Canadian election settles down, whether it be him, whether it be his rival from the Conservative Party, they will have to wake up and acknowledge the realities of economics in terms of the sheer amount of money that Indian brings in Canada and continue to push forward for their case?
Well, with all due respect, let me state that India's relations with Canada have deteriorated so much that it is not going to be easy to bring things back on even keel. If Justin Trudeau comes back, then I do not think any early rapprochement will be possible. The prospect of an improvement in the relationship is going to be there only if Justin Trudeau loses the next election and there is a new government in power. I say this with firm conviction because I've seen how the India-Canada relationship has plummeted so much downwards, and in fact, it has now hit rock bottom. So it is not something seasonal. This is something of an exceptional nature. Now, I come to this other question about the problems for students which have been mounting. It's true, cost of living have been going up because Canada is witnessing inflation. Visas are becoming difficult to get. Canada has already reduced the number of student visas that it will issue every year. I understand the cut is about 35% as compared to last year. And then the political relationship always impacts other issues. It impacts economic relations. It impacts people-to-people relations. And it also impacts things like student visas. Because of the fact that the Canadian embassy here, the High Commission, has been cut so much in size, first last year and again now again, their ability to issue enough visas has come down. In any case, they will always take it as an excuse that, look, our High Commission strength has been reduced. We are not able to issue so many visas. They're already doing that. So the impact of the deteriorating political relationship is going to be there also in regard to the students and their travel to
But
Canada.
Ambassador Dal, is this not a consequence that needs to be factored? Ms. Ambassador Dal, is this not a consequence that needs to be factored in terms of foreign policy making? Not for a second am I questioning the wisdom behind the decision to expel diplomats and to take a clear stand after the allegations that have been leveled against India. But when we look at the economics of it, it's not just Canada that benefits from it. There is a sizable amount of remittances which, for instance, the state of Punjab gets from Canada in terms of hundreds and crores here. And we're talking of lives of a lakh people plus being affected. Is this not something which also, unfortunately, will have to be factored in before taking drastic decisions?
Let me state categorically that all these things are secondary to the nature and tenor of the political relationship. Canada has become a hotbed for anti-India activities by extremist Sikhs. These extremist Sikhs are openly calling for the breakup of India and the creation of Khalistan. They have attacked the Indian High Commission in Ottawa, and they have put up posters calling for the assassination of Indian diplomats, including the Indian High Commissioner in Canada. So how can we say that we can ignore these things, and what is important is how to have visas issued more promptly and how to ensure that students go? No. I come back to the point which I had made in a discussion on your channel earlier today afternoon. The only way out is for India to create more universities, have more seats available here for students, so that our students are not denied admission in our universities and are not forced to go looking for admissions outside. You know, things are becoming pretty difficult for our students. Firstly, the costs are going up. Secondly, look, a lot of students went to Russia, Ukraine, and because of the war, they have been facing difficulties and they've had to be repatriated from there. Similarly, difficulties keep arising in other places. And the only way out, the only
Ambassador Dayal, I agree with your view that India needs to give better opportunities, but I'm not sure how feasible that is. Every time there is a case of law and order or any women's safety, the overwhelming discourse on social media is we need to leave this country. That's the reality. I'm not defending it. Naveen Chopra, ultimately, is it a bubble which is bound to burst sooner or later? Because it's not just in Canada. It's also been in New Zealand. It's also been in Australia. It's also been the United Kingdom. It's also been in the rest of the Europe. At the end of the day, there is a basic number of jobs that can be created to support a population and support a plus-size population with Indians coming in droves. At the end of the day, should this business of encouraging people to go abroad and selling them false dreams in terms of a great life abroad, should there also be checks on it? Because it is an unfeasible dream at the end of the day.
You see, am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, Naveen Chopra, please go on.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
Mr. Chopra, we can. Please complete your point.
Okay. So I would, if I may, starting from point in terms of the education and providing more seats, absolutely agree with that. But the core reason, there are two core reasons why Indian students go overseas. One is to get the best education that they can, if they're able to afford it, because at the end of the day, in terms of the overall population, that traffic outflow is still very, very small. The second is the lack of job opportunities within our country, where we've been experiencing a jobless growth, and this is a open secret. Everybody knows that. The second aspect is that you cannot escape demographics and the political scenarios, as His Excellency would know very well from he's a seasoned bureaucrat, are governed first and foremost by pragmatism. Eventually, pragmatism kicks in, and as far as the Khalistan movement, for example, is concerned, it's in Southall in England. It started in England and is still very strong.
Okay, I think we are having problems with the connection again, Mr. Chopra, but we've got the gist of your argument, and it's an excellent point as well, that pragmatism needs to kick in. And reality is, in India, that there is a shortage of jobs, there's a shortage of opportunities, but there's also the reality that there is an artificial sense of grass is being green on the other side that is created, which is why we, as Astha will point out, so many of the other students who have gone to India, to abroad, have found out that the lack of job opportunities is not very different from what they see in India. However, the reality is we need to create better opportunities, but that is a long process, and lives of many people who have been impacted should have to be taken into account. Which side will pragmatism kick in first? Because Trudeau and Canada also has to realize the economics of it, remains to be seen. But thank you so much, Naveen Chopra ji, Ambassador Dayal, always an honor to speak to you, and also Astha for joining me in this chat. It's time for a short break. Shreya Upadhyay joins you on the other side with The Nation at 9. Stay tuned to Mirror now.